On the morning of Friday, June 13, 2025, the world woke to news that fundamentally altered the fragile balance of power in the Middle East. Israel had launched a massive and coordinated military offensive against the Islamic Republic of Iran. The operation, codenamed Operation Rising Lion, was announced by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a somber address to his nation and the world. He characterized the action not as an act of aggression, but as a necessary and preemptive strike. The primary and explicit goal, he stated, was to neutralize what Israel has long considered its most profound existential threat, the imminent possibility of a nuclear-armed Iran. This was not a minor skirmish or a limited raid. It was a full-scale assault designed to inflict crippling damage on Iran's military and nuclear infrastructure. The initial waves of the attack were overwhelming in their intensity and scope. Reports quickly emerged of powerful explosions rocking key locations across Iran, from the bustling capital of Tehran to the heavily fortified nuclear facilities deep within the country's interior. The Israeli Air Force, renowned for its precision and technological superiority, spearheaded the assault, striking multiple targets simultaneously. The operation was clearly the culmination of years, if not decades, of meticulous planning, intelligence gathering, and strategic preparation. It represented a momentous gamble by the Israeli government, a decisive move to take matters into its own hands after years of diplomatic efforts and international sanctions failed to halt Iran's nuclear ambitions. The name itself, Rising Lion, evokes a sense of decisive, powerful action after a period of perceived patience. The scale of the operation immediately signaled that this was a point of no return. The targets were not just symbolic, they were strategic and central to Iran's power structure. The attacks hit the very heart of the Iranian regime's defense and scientific establishments. News outlets, struggling to verify information amidst the chaos, broadcast images of smoke plumes rising over Iranian cities. The international community was caught off guard by the sheer audacity and force of the Israeli action. For years, the question of an Israeli strike on Iran was a subject of constant speculation and debate. On this day, the speculation ended, and a new, terrifying reality began to unfold across the region. This move marks one of the most significant military escalations in the Middle East in the 21st century. It is an event whose consequences will undoubtedly reverberate for years to come, reshaping alliances, economies, and the daily lives of millions. The long simmering shadow war between Israel and Iran, previously fought through proxies, cyber attacks, and covert assassinations, had finally erupted into open, direct conflict. The world now holds its breath, watching to see how Iran will respond and whether this bold Israeli gambit will succeed in its aims or plunge an already volatile region into a devastating, widespread war that could draw in global powers. The lion has indeed risen, and the world is now forced to confront the aftermath of its roar. For Israel, the justification for Operation Rising Lion is straightforward and deeply rooted in its national security doctrine. Prime Minister Netanyahu articulated a clear and unwavering message. This was an act of self-defense against a regime that has repeatedly called for Israel's destruction. The core of Israel's argument rests on the belief that a nuclear Iran is not a threat that can be contained or deterred. It is a menace that must be eliminated. From the Israeli perspective, allowing Tehran to obtain a nuclear weapon would be a catastrophic failure, creating a permanent shadow of annihilation over the Jewish state. This belief has been a consistent theme in Israeli politics for decades, transcending party lines and forming the bedrock of its defense policy toward Iran. The immediate trigger for the attack appears to be recent accelerated developments in Iran's nuclear program. Just a day before the strike, on June 12, 2025, the International Atomic Energy Agency had passed a resolution censuring Iran for its lack of compliance and its advancing enrichment activities. Iran's defiant response was to announce plans to build a new enrichment facility and upgrade its centrifuges, pushing its program closer to weapons-grade capability. For Israeli leaders, this was the final red line. It was seen as concrete proof that diplomacy had failed and that Iran was on an unstoppable path to the bomb, making military action the only remaining viable option to protect their nation's future. The Israeli government has long viewed Iran's public rhetoric as more than just political posturing. When Iranian leaders speak of wiping Israel off the map, Israeli officials take them at their word. This perception is colored by the historical trauma of the Holocaust, which instills a powerful never-again ethos in the nation's psyche. The idea of a sworn enemy, which also funds and arms hostile proxy groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza, acquiring the ultimate weapon is an intolerable scenario. Therefore, the preemptive strike was framed not as a choice, but as a solemn duty to ensure the survival of the state and its people for generations to come. This rationale places the operation within a historical context of Israeli preemptive military actions, most notably the 1981 strike on Iraq's Osirak nuclear reactor and the 2007 bombing of a suspected Syrian nuclear site. In both instances, Israel acted unilaterally to destroy a perceived nuclear threat before it could fully materialize. Operation Rising Lion is the latest and by far the most ambitious application of this doctrine, known as the Begin Doctrine. It is a high-stakes declaration that Israel will not outsource its security or wait for international permission when it believes its very existence is hanging in the balance, regardless of the potential diplomatic or military fallout from its actions. The execution of Operation Rising Lion was a complex and multi-layered military endeavor, showcasing the full spectrum of Israel's advanced capabilities. The most visible component was the massive aerial assault carried out by the Israeli Air Force. Squadrons of advanced fighter jets, including the F-35 Adir, flew daring long-range missions to penetrate heavily defended Iranian airspace. Their primary targets were the cornerstones of Iran's nuclear program. The uranium enrichment facilities at Natanz and Fordow, the latter of which is buried deep under a mountain, were struck repeatedly. The goal was not just to damage these sites, but to render them inoperable for the foreseeable future, setting back Iran's nuclear clock by years. Beyond the nuclear sites, the Israeli strikes targeted the command and control infrastructure of the Iranian military, with a particular focus on the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Key military bases, missile production factories, and underground storage facilities for Iran's vast arsenal of ballistic missiles were hit. In a significant blow to the Iranian regime, reports emerged that the strike successfully eliminated high-value targets, including the commander-in-chief of the IRGC, Hossein Salami, and several other senior military officials and nuclear scientists. The attacks also reportedly destroyed much of Iran's S-300 air defense systems, crippling its ability to defend against subsequent waves of attacks and creating a corridor for Israeli jets. What made this operation particularly audacious was the integration of covert ground operations. Parallel to the air campaign, Israeli Mossad agents and special forces teams who had allegedly infiltrated Iran enacted a campaign of sabotage. These operatives were reportedly responsible for triggering explosions at several underground missile stockpiles, causing chaos and destruction from within. This hybrid approach, combining overwhelming air power with clandestine actions on the ground, was designed to maximize damage and sow confusion within the Iranian leadership. It demonstrated a remarkable level of intelligence and operational reach, turning Iran's own territory into a battlefield. To understand the magnitude of this operation, one might compare it to a high-stakes surgical procedure on a national scale, but one performed with a sledgehammer. The precision of the strikes on specific buildings and infrastructure, combined with the brute force applied, shows a level of military sophistication few nations possess. It was a clear demonstration of power intended to leave no doubt about Israel's capabilities and its willingness to use them. The combined air and ground assault was a meticulously choreographed symphony of destruction, aimed at decapitating Iran's military leadership and demolishing its most prized strategic assets in a single decisive blow. The international response to Operation Rising Lion has been a mixture of shock, condemnation, and carefully worded neutrality, highlighting the deep geopolitical divides the attack has exposed. The most critical reaction came from the United States, Israel's closest ally. The White House moved swiftly to distance itself from the operation, making it clear that this was a unilateral Israeli decision. U.S. Senator Marco Rubio released a statement that encapsulated the official American position. Tonight, Israel has taken unilateral action against Iran. We are not involved. This public distancing is a strategic move designed to prevent the conflict from immediately escalating into a direct confrontation between Iran and the United States. Despite the official hands-off stance, the US had clearly anticipated the possibility of such a strike. In the days leading up to the attack, the US military had taken precautionary measures, partially evacuating non-essential embassy staff from Iraq and moving dependents of military personnel from bases across the Middle East. Security for American diplomats in Israel was also heightened. These actions suggest that while the US may not have given a green light, it was well aware of the escalating tensions and Israel's likely course of action. The American strategy now appears to be one of containment, to keep the conflict confined between Israel and Iran and to protect US assets in the region from potential retaliatory strikes. Beyond the United States, reactions have varied. European nations, which have long championed a diplomatic solution through the Iran nuclear deal, have expressed grave concern over the escalation and called for immediate de-escalation from all sides. Russia and China, who have closer ties to Iran, are expected to condemn the Israeli attack in the strongest terms at the United Nations, viewing it as a violation of international law and a dangerous act of aggression. For many countries, the primary fear is the potential impact on the global economy. A full-blown war in the Middle East could disrupt oil supplies from the Persian Gulf, sending energy prices soaring and triggering a worldwide economic crisis. In a direct message to the world, Israel released a stark 25-second video following the announcement of the operation. The video, featuring dramatic music and images of its military might, ended with a simple but powerful question posed to the international community. History is watching. Whose side will you stand on? This message is a clear attempt by Israel to frame the conflict in moral terms, portraying its actions as a defense of the free world against a tyrannical regime. It is a challenge to other nations, forcing them to take a position in a conflict that most would prefer to avoid. And it underscores Israel's determination to see this fight through, with or without global consensus. The immediate aftermath of the Israeli assault has left Iran reeling, but its leadership is projecting an image of defiance rather than defeat. While the full extent of the damage is still being assessed, the loss of key military figures like IRGC commander Hossein Salami and top nuclear scientists represents a staggering blow. However, the Iranian regime has a history of resilience and a deep-seated ideology of resistance against what it terms Western and Zionist aggression. Public statements from Tehran have been filled with vows of a crushing and historic response. President Masoud Pezeshkian, who had previously refused to halt uranium enrichment, is now under immense pressure to retaliate forcefully to restore national pride and deter further attacks. Iran's capacity for retaliation is formidable and multifaceted. The nation possesses an estimated 2,000 ballistic missiles, some capable of reaching Israel with powerful warheads. Since October 2024, Iran reportedly ramped up its missile production, anticipating a potential conflict. The key question is not if Iran will respond, but how and where. A direct missile barrage on Israeli cities is a high-risk option that would almost certainly trigger an even more devastating Israeli counterattack, potentially leading to a full-scale regional war. The Iranian leadership must now calculate what level of response is significant enough to be seen as a credible retaliation without provoking an uncontrollable escalation. Another major threat comes from Iran's network of powerful proxy forces across the Middle East. Hezbollah in Lebanon is the most potent of these, with an arsenal of over 150,000 rockets and missiles pointed at Israel. A coordinated attack by Hezbollah from the north, combined with strikes from other pro-Iranian groups in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, could open up multiple fronts against Israel. This ring of fire strategy is designed to overwhelm Israel's advanced air defense systems, such as the Iron Dome, and inflict mass casualties on its civilian population. Such a scenario would transform the conflict from a bilateral fight into a multi-front regional war with catastrophic humanitarian consequences. The most dangerous possibility is that the attack could push Iran to make the one decision Israel sought to prevent, to weaponize its nuclear program fully. Having seen its peaceful program attacked, hardliners in Tehran may now argue that only a nuclear deterrent can guarantee the nation's security against future strikes. If Iran expels all international inspectors, withdraws from the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and sprints towards developing a bomb, the Israeli strike will have ironically created the very outcome it was meant to stop. The world now watches and waits for Tehran's next move, knowing that its decision will determine whether the region steps back from the abyss or plunges into a dark and unpredictable conflict. We are now standing on the precipice of a new and dangerous era in the Middle East. Operation Rising Lion was not an end, but the beginning of a new uncertain chapter. The Israeli government has made its move, a calculated and high-stakes gamble to reshape the strategic landscape. The core points are clear. Israel launched this massive preemptive strike because it believes an Iranian nuclear weapon is an intolerable threat to its existence, and it felt that all other options had been exhausted. The attack was comprehensive, targeting not only nuclear facilities like Natanz, but also killing top Iranian military commanders and sabotaging infrastructure from within. The immediate future will be defined by Iran's response. Tehran's leadership is now at a critical crossroads. A weak or purely symbolic retaliation could be seen as a sign of weakness, inviting further attacks. However, an all-out assault on Israel or its allies could trigger a devastating regional war that Iran itself may not survive in its current form. The world is particularly focused on the scheduled US-Iran talks in Oman, set for Sunday, June 15th. The fate of these talks, if they happen at all, will be a key indicator of whether a diplomatic off-ramp, however narrow, still exists, or if the path is now irrevocably set towards wider military conflict. The actions of neighboring countries will also be critically important. The role of nations like Pakistan has entered the strategic calculus, with speculation that the US may seek access to regional bases should the conflict expand. This highlights how a direct confrontation between Israel and Iran can quickly ripple outwards, pulling in other nations and creating complex new alliances and pressures. The conflict is not taking place in a vacuum. It is happening in one of the most strategically vital and volatile regions on the planet, with global implications for security, energy, and trade. In summary, Israel has unilaterally redrawn the map of Middle Eastern conflict, moving its long shadow war with Iran into the open. The justification was rooted in a deep-seated fear of annihilation. The attack was powerful and designed to be decisive. The United States has stepped back, leaving the two main adversaries in the ring. What happens next is the great unknown. The world waits to see if this audacious Israeli operation will lead to a cowed Iran and a safer Israel, or if it has lit the fuse on a powder keg that will consume the entire region in flames. History is indeed watching, and the next few days will write the next page.